Hello everyone. In this video we're going to cover how to pickle cherry peppers. My name is Rebecca from stockingmypantry.com. So as you can see here, I have a blog post already by the same topic, and I'm going to run through that blog post and I'll also link to it in the description. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the basics of it. If pictures are a little bit small, I'll pop them up so you can see them better. I'll also leave links to everything that I mentioned in the blog post that you might find helpful in the description as well. All right, let's get started. Okay, so we'll start off by just looking at the recipe. Thankfully, the recipe is super simple. It calls for 3 pounds of cherry peppers. And if you have a different amount, I'm going to tell you at the end how to adapt the recipe, so don't worry about that. 6 cups of white vinegar, which is 5% acidity. That's just going to be your basic distilled white vinegar. 2 cups of water, 2 teaspoons of kosher salt, which is optional, 3 garlic cloves or more to taste, and ball pickle crisp, which is optional, and if you are going to use it, you'll need 1/8 of a teaspoon per pint. Now, I have a whole article on what pickle crisp is, alternatives, and that type of thing, and I'll link to that in the description as well. Okay, so now let's get into how to make or how to pickle hot cherry peppers. Okay, now I started off in the article by saying you need to wash and sterilize the jars, but sterilizing the jars is definitely not needed if you are going to can your peppers. If you're doing quick pickled peppers, which basically means you're just going to put the brine on and stick them in the fridge, it's good to start off with sterilized jars. I do have an article that I'll link to from the National Center for Home Food Preservation that tells you how to sterilize your canning jars. At the very least, you'll want to use really hot soapy water and wash and dry your jars. Okay? So the first step after you've gotten your jars clean and ready to go is to make the brine. So to make the brine, all you have to do is bring the water, vinegar, and salt to a boil, and you simmer it until the salt dissolves. Okay, and you can actually add the garlic to the brine and then remove the garlic. By adding it to the brine, I mean before you simmer it and all of that, and then remove it before you put the brine into the jars. I prefer, when I'm using garlic, is to just put the raw garlic in the jar rather than putting it in the brine, but either way will work. Okay, so now let's talk about preparing the peppers for pickling. Okay, so you're going to start off, as always, just wash and dry the peppers. And now you can pickle the cherry peppers whole, halved, sliced. I'm going to show you all of the different ways, and you can also leave the seeds in or take the seeds out, just depending on whether or not you want the heat. So I have a few pictures here of different ways that you can prepare them. You can see in this picture that they've been cut in half with the seeds removed. In this next picture, the seeds were removed. You can see the seeds off to the right, and they were sliced up. And then you can also do whole cherry peppers with the stems removed. Now you can see on the left, I removed the stems, and that would be sufficient if I took a toothpick and poked holes through the cherry peppers. You don't need to do a lot, but you're going to need to do some for the brine to be able to penetrate into the cherry peppers. And you really want it infusing it, and it just helps with the preservation process as well. So what I ended up deciding to do is I took the cherry peppers and I just cut off the top. You can see how there's just a little bit of holes to where the brine can go into the cherry peppers, but for the most part, they're whole. And the reason I decided to do whole cherry peppers is because I just like the way they look in the jar. I mean, to be honest with you. Also, I didn't have a ton of cherry peppers to work with. I had grown mine in my arrow garden, and I'll pop up a picture so that you can see. And I had some, they were ready to go. I needed to do something, but I didn't have a ton of cherry peppers. And so I didn't need to pack a ton into jars because I just had a handful of cherry peppers. If you have a ton of cherry peppers and you're wanting to, maybe you don't have a ton of jars, or you don't want to, use up a ton of your jars, then you're going to be better off slicing them, because by far more will fit into each jar if you slice them first. Okay, so regardless of whether you're slicing them, having them, using them whole or whatever, the next step is going to be to pack the peppers into the jars, and you want them to be well packed. Don't crush them to where you're breaking up the peppers and everything, but you do want them packed in there really well. Oh, and by the way, if you are going to use garlic, and if you're going to use the pickle crisp, this is the time to do it. You can put, I like 1 clove of garlic per pint when I'm using garlic, and per pint you would use 1/8 of a teaspoon of the pickle crisp. So put the garlic, the pickle crisp into the jar, and then put your peppers into the jar. All right, once you have the peppers into the jar, you're going to pour the brine that's kind of, it's maybe still kind of hot, but not boiling at this point. You're going to pour it into the jar and just cover the peppers with the brine. Now you can see that I like using a canning funnel for this. You don't have to have one, but it does make it a lot easier, less messy. So I do recommend that. Now in this picture, you can see that my cherry peppers, I think in part because they were whole, just wanted to pop up to the top. And I didn't worry too much about that, because I personally, since I had such a small amount, I was just going to quick pickle them. I wasn't canning them or anything like that. So I just poured as much brine into the jar as I could. And then knowing when I put the lid on, it would kind of push the peppers down into the liquid. Okay, so now here you can see the peppers in the jar, and you can see the type of lid that I used. These are plastic mason jar lids. I like using them for a lot of things. They're not suitable for canning, obviously. You have to use canning lids for that. But these are great to use for any type of, like a quick pickle like this. And one reason that they're better than using the canning lids is that the canning lids, are made out of metal, and then there's a lot of salt in the brine, and it can corrode the lids. So I personally just like these plastic lids for when I'm storing something in the refrigerator. So one thing, important thing to note is you can see in the one picture that the peppers are floating. When I first put the brine in, the peppers just all floated to the top. But as the peppers took on more of the brine, you can see that they began to sink down and were more evenly distributed. So if they're floating at first, don't worry about that at all. It's totally fine. Okay, now if you're going to just making quick pickled peppers, at this point, you would just let the peppers come to room temperature. Remember, the brine might still be kind of warm. Let them come to room temperature and stick them in the fridge, and you're done. They should last at least a month, maybe 2 months, sometimes even longer, because it is a pretty strong vinegar solution. But I try to eat them within a couple of months. Okay, but now if you want to keep them longer term, or you want them to be shelf stable, then you need to can them. And so that's what we're going to talk about now. Okay, so when you can the cherry peppers, you want to leave a 1/2 inch of headspace. And to learn more about headspace, I'll link you to an article that I wrote on what headspace is. But you need to leave a 1/2 inch of headspace when you're canning the peppers. You would also need to use a debubbling tool or a chopstick or something. Just go around and poke around in the jar to remove any air bubbles. Then you would put your lids on, and you would water bath can the peppers for 10 minutes. So it's super simple. So either way, whether you do the quick pickled peppers or you water bath can the peppers, this is an easy recipe, and it's one of my favorites. And it's a great way, especially the quick pickled, is a great way if you have just a handful of peppers, or maybe like me, you garden, but you didn't have a whole lot to do at once, or maybe you bought some peppers from the grocery store and you have some more than you need and you want to preserve them. Quick pickling is a way to get it done really in just a few minutes of work and time. Stick them in the fridge and you'll have them to enjoy. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel, and also if you would like the video. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.